Frances told me a few years later that she was sort of thrilled at the way that Diana sort of freed herself, as she saw it, from the shackles of royalty and from being a member of the royal family and striking out on her own.
A few years later, Frances informed me that she was rather ecstatic about Diana's seeming liberation from the constraints of monarchy, her escape from the royal family, and her decision to go it alone. For more than 2 centuries, the most prominent families in Britain hid a secret that was so disgraceful to Victorian music society that it was actually written out of history. They deleted evidence, tampered with documents, and permanently separated a mother from her music kid. They were able to conceal this information until June 14, 2013 music, when scientists revealed a finding that rocked the British monarchy to its foundation. Prince William, the future monarch of England, has Indian ancestry, according to DNA testing. The family had misrepresented his great-great-grandmother. The reality of what transpired with her is tragic. This is the tale of the music woman that history attempted to ignore, Eliza Cowark. The revelation that altered everything. Britain's DNA, a Scottish music genetic testing company, made a startling revelation in June 2013 that thrilled the British media. Geneticist Dr. Jim Wilson of the University of Edinburgh revealed music discoveries that have the potential to alter the course of royal history. Prince William's mitochondrial DNA, which is only inherited through the maternal line, was traced back 7 music generations by his team. They discovered something remarkable. The unusual genetic marker HLO group, music, R30b, was present in Prince William's mother's side. There were only 14 other persons in the world with this particular DNA sequence. 1 from Nepal and 13 from music, India. This marker was unique in Europe. William was not put to the test directly by the scientists. Rather, 2 living relatives in his music, direct maternal line through Princess Diana provided saliva samples for analysis. From Diana's mother, Frances Music Sean Kidd, to a woman named Eliza Cowark, these relatives were linked in an uninterrupted line of mothers and daughters. This is where the music becomes complex. According to the Spencer family tree, Eliza Cowark was Armenian for more than 200 years. According to records, she was from the esteemed music European community of Armenia. DNA evidence, however, pointed to a different narrative. According to Alistair Moffat, the researcher who looked into music Eliza's ancestry, she was mistakenly labeled as Armenian and her true ethnicity was left out of the family history. The music's deceptive portrayal persisted even after Diana married Prince Charles in 1981. Despite being aware of the facts, the family music decided to keep it a secret. Eliza Cowark was who? Eliza Cowark was who? An often ignored woman whose existence was music. She was born in Surat, Gujarat, India, circa 1790. Prior to becoming a music British colony, India was ruled by the British East Music India Company, a strong company that ran the nation like a business. There were traders from music all over the world in Surat, which was a bustling commercial hub. Nowadays, 90% of the diamonds in the world are cut and polished in Surat. Music was where people made and lost their fortunes back then. Given that Eliza's last name, Cowark, is related to the Armenian name Kaver, it is likely that her father was an Armenian trader, music. She received letters written in Armenian script, and the Armenian community had been operating businesses and constructing churches in India for ages, music. DNA evidence verified Eliza's mother's Indian heritage. Eliza met Theodore Forbes, a Scottish music merchant, in this bustling metropolis. He was the 3rd son of a Scottish family and was born in 1788. He would receive no family fortune because he was the 3rd music son. The 2nd son, music, might receive a reduced settlement, whereas the eldest son would inherit the estate. In an attempt to make his fortune, Theodore sailed to India to work for the East India Company, music. Eliza was employed by Theodore as his housekeeper. But, music, housekeeper means more than it sounds in this instance. Numerous British men had relationships with Indian women, according to research by Alistair Moffat, music. These were frequently exploitative and covert affairs rather than unions or partnerships, music. Together, Theodore and Eliza had 2 kids, music. In 1812, Catherine was born, and in 1814, Alexander. Music, Eliza and Theodore never got married. He indicated skepticism about her role in his records by referring to her as his housekeeper and identifying her as the supposed mother of their daughter, music, Catherine. The brutality of Theodore's treatment of his children's mother, music, is demonstrated by this word choice. The cruel division. A tragic turn occurs in Catherine's story. When Catherine was a little girl, her mother abandoned her when Theodore Forbes, music, made the decision to return to Britain. Suppose you were 9 years old when you were informed, your music, leaving India forever. The sole residence you have ever known. Unaware that it would be their final encounter, Catherine had to leave her mother, Eliza Cowark, music. We're not sure what happened to Catherine, and Eliza never saw her again. There are no grave markers or records of her passing, music. History forgot her. Very little is known about her, including music, when she died, said Dr. Jim Wilson, the geneticist music, who conducted the study for this story. A future king of England's 5-time great-grandmother, Eliza Cowark, music, was forgotten and abandoned. In contrast, Catherine went to Scotland, where she, music, was raised in a British culture. She was educated, taught good manners, and instructed not to speak of her mother. In Scotland, music, Catherine got married and had kids. The family line continued via music daughters who carried the rare Indian mtDNA, which subsequently indicated the authenticity of her ancestry. Music. But the narrative itself was altered. The falsehood started in Victorian Britain, when people were preoccupied with good breeding and music bloodlines. Being of Indian descent was not acceptable to the aristocracy, who placed a high emphasis on racial purity, music. The family, music, decided to conceal Catherine's Indian ancestry. Too many people were aware that, music, Catherine had a mother, therefore they were unable to remove Eliza. They asserted that she was Armenian instead. Armenian music was regarded as both European and exotic. As a result, Eliza Cowark's Indian ancestry was removed from the music narrative, and she became Armenian. They polished their stories and edited documentation. No one questioned it by the time Catherine's descendants, music, rose in the social ranks. Their great-great-great, music, grandmother was thought to be Armenian by everyone. In the past, mixed heritage was not honored, but today it is, according to Dr. Jim Wilson. Theodore indicated, music, that they were not married when he referred to Eliza as his housekeeper. This demonstrates that Theodore Forbes decided to conceal his connection with Eliza and their mixed-race music children because he felt embarrassed about it. Generations pass while the falsehood persists. Let's trace the history of music, a hidden knowledge that has been passed down through the ages. Ruth, music, Gill was the daughter of Jane Scott, who was the daughter of Catherine Scott Forbes. With centuries-old family ties, Ruth Gill was primarily Scottish. It was passed down from mother to daughter, but the Indian DNA in her background, music, was becoming less obvious. Ruth Gill wed the fourth, music, Baron Formoy, Maurice Roe. This was noteworthy since the Roaches belonged to the Irish aristocracy, a high social class, and Baron Formoy was a friend of music King George V's sixth class. Frances Ruth Roe is the daughter of Ruth and Maurice, music. This relates to Diana's narrative. Frances Ruth Roe married John Spencer Viscount Althorpe in Westminster Abbey on June 1, 1954, music. One of the season's biggest social music events was this wedding. Princesses Margaret and Anne, the Queen Mother, Prince Philip, and Queen Elizabeth II were there. Frances became the youngest lady to get married at Westminster Abbey in more than half a century at the age of just 18, music. There was a lot of music press coverage of the ceremony, which was beautiful. However, nobody was aware, or at least nobody mentioned, that Frances possessed Indian DNA derived from Eliza Cowark, music, a woman who had been deleted from family records 140 years prior. 5 children were born to Frances and John Spencer. One of them was John, a son, music, who sadly passed away in January 1960, just 10 hours after his birth. They brought Diana Frances Spencer, a daughter, into the world on July 1, 1961. Diana played with young princes, music, Andrew and Edward while growing up at Park House on the Sandringham estate. Music, Diana became Lady Diana Spencer after her father became the 8th Earl Spencer and her grandfather passed away in 1975. She was lovely, endearing, and music, ideal for a prince. Her DNA included the uncommon haplogroup R30b, which would ultimately reveal everything. Around 750 million music people watched the July 29, 1981, wedding of Lady Diana Spencer and Prince Charles on television. It was dubbed a fairy tale wedding and the wedding of the century. Charles wore his uniform as a Navy commander.